Good evening. Welcome to our first ever Tough as Nails virtual storytelling event. My name is Caitlin Capalla, and I'm the Communications and Events Manager at Habitat for Humanity. I've had the privilege of working for Habitat and with the Women Build program for over 3 years now. I'm so excited that you'll be able to join us for this fundraising event. This event was born out of an idea many years ago. While our fundraising events are typically based around wine nights with the girls, fitness classes, and more, we wanted to think outside of the box. Sure, there's a time and place for stuff like that, but women are into so much more than just that. We wanted to have intellectual conversations, panelists, and more to bring a different type of community together. And with that, this event was born. We're so excited to partner with the Monti to help us with our 7 storytellers this evening to tell a variety of stories from their backgrounds. So let's just go ahead and get started. Our first speaker is Jenny Womack. She spent 21 years working with the UNC Occupational Therapy Department and the Partnership on Aging. She's a folklorist at heart and is excited to tell her story today.
When I was a kid, the fairy tales that I read had these images of fairy godmothers that were these sort of tall, willowy creatures, usually in the books I read, blonde, if you will, and they had stars surrounding their heads or coming out of the end of their wands. And they wore these long flowing gowns with these tight bodices and these little sparkly shoes that just barely fit on their feet. So with that image pretty firmly implanted in my mind, imagine how surprised I was as an adult to come across a fairy godmother who was quite a bit different than those images. She was at the most 5'2", if she had on her JCPenney tennis shoes. And she had these work pants that she wore almost every day, along with a solid color sweatshirt of some color. She was missing part of a finger on her left hand from a table saw accident. I never knew her without gray hair, and she usually wielded a hammer instead of a wand. Her name was Frankie, and she was tough as nails. I met Frankie when she ran a summer camp, and I was a counselor there. And there are plenty of stories from that time in my life, usually some mixture of sort of fear and awe and respect for Frankie, because she was my boss after all, plus she could start a one-match fire. She knew the name of every tree in the woods, and she had this uncanny ability to know if you came in late from a day off, even if she was sound asleep. But for this story, let's fast forward about 10 years. I'm in my late 20s, and Frankie and I have lives that both converge in Western North Carolina. She was retired by that time, and my partner and I were just starting out as sort of young professionals with our first real jobs. And we got to know Frankie in a way that we hadn't known her as a boss. And we went back and forth in time with her, backward to understand who she was, that she had grown up poor in Florida, but was sponsored by someone her mother worked with to go to college. And that became a lifelong love affair for her with learning and with Florida State University, where eventually she became a professor and coached the first women's track team. We always loved hearing those stories because it was in the days before women's sports were funded. And so Frankie would sneak into the men's locker room and steal the uniforms that the men's team had discarded and resize them for her women, and then pile all of these women runners into her 15-year-old wood-paneled station wagon and drive them state to state so they could compete. So in those years in the mountains of Western North Carolina, we became the passengers for Frankie, not in the wood-paneled station wagon. Thankfully, by then she had upgraded to a minivan. But we would explore every nook and cranny of the mountains and find every waterfall we could find, look at the mountain laurel when it first bloomed in the spring, and see all kinds of creatures that we could find in the woods. And she came into our home and helped us do things. She taught us in her home, in her workshop, how to build tables, how to carve out a totem pole from a poplar log, how to hew out a log so that we could make a pulpit for a woodland chapel that someone was building. And at our house, she taught us how to build a deck and how to fix a water heater. And that house, our house, had a story all its own, because when Frankie heard that we wanted to buy a house, but we were kind of saddled by student loan debt at that time, she bought the house, and then she rented it to us until we could build up enough of a down payment that she could shift the mortgage over to us. Now, this was a really generous act, but it was a business arrangement. I will never forget the time I had forgotten to write the rent check one month, and I came home from work to find this voicemail on my answering machine. One single line where she said, "J-Wo," that was a nickname she had given me at camp. "J-Wo, I bank on the first." This was not a fairy godmother to mess around with. That home became for me the symbol of her expectations of us, her hopes for us. It became the time I knew she was my fairy godmother. But we were not the only ones that she helped find home. Not too many years before Frankie died, there was a really bitter winter in Western North Carolina, and she heard something out on her deck on New Year's Eve night. She opened her door, and she saw a bird huddling up next to the glass, this white bird. So she kind of stepped out to figure out what was going on, how the bird might have come up to her house. And meanwhile, the bird went on in and made itself right at home in Frankie's living room. So she wrapped it up in a blanket, and as she was sort of cuddling the bird and making sure it was okay, she realized it had a band on its leg, and that band had the letters HOD and the number 622. She knew that HOD 622 belonged to somebody because it was a banded bird, and indeed it was an American rock dove, what some people call a homing pigeon. So Frankie spent the next week figuring out where this bird had come from, and eventually returned it to its home in Anniston, Alabama, to the Heart of Dixie Bird Club. The man who owned this bird club couldn't believe that his bird that he had released in November of that year as part of a funeral ceremony had made it that far when it got taken off course by bad weather, and it ended up on a deck in Western North Carolina. HOD 622 didn't know how lucky it was that it landed on the deck of a fairy godmother. And Frankie was offered a $50 reward for returning that bird, but true to form, she didn't take the reward. She matched the reward and donated it to the animal shelter for a bird rescue fund. So when I think about those fairy tales of my youth, they were always about the fairy godmothers spreading magic and good fortune. I don't know so much about the magic part because Frankie was a pretty pragmatic godmother, but she certainly brought an abundance of good fortune to my life. She set a standard for how to live, she invested in my future, and she always said, pay it forward instead of paying it back. When Frankie died, after 92 years of fairy godmothering, we released a ceremonial white dove at her memorial service. Thank you.
Let's give her a round of applause for telling such a great story. Here up next, we have Donna Washington, a professional storyteller of over 33 years. After receiving her degree in speech from Northwestern University, she relocated down to Durham and has enjoyed staying close to home over the past year, even though she's used to traveling across the country to tell her story. We're lucky to have her tonight, and here she is, Donna.
I am not a girly girl. Never have been. It was the bane of my mother's existence. My mother was a pinup girl. She was a cheerleader. She was gorgeous, but I was no beauty queen person. And my mother dressed me in like the cupcake dresses and everything until I got to be about 4 when I said, enough. And I became the thing that she really did not understand. I became a tomboy. And all of the women in my family, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, none of them could understand why I wanted to climb trees and pick up frogs. Now, my great-grandmother, oh my gosh, she was absolutely beautiful. It skips generations, I'm just saying. She was beautiful. She had this long, gorgeous silver hair. And I used to watch my grandmother braid it up. And one day I said to my great-grandmother, I said, Grandma Topsy, when will my hair be that color? And she said, these are wisdom locks. When you have lived enough and loved enough, your hair will be this color. Which meant I'd have to be very old. And at the age of 5, I just thought it would never happen. Well, eventually I did grow up, and I had a son who is absolutely wonderful. And then I had a daughter. And the second they put my daughter into my arms, I knew I was the wrong person to be raising this child because she was gorgeous. Yeah, skips a generation. Just gorgeous. I mean, now, some people say, oh, I have such a pretty baby. People would stop and ask me where I got this one. She was the sort of little girl who would be walking and people would just stop and go, oh, just beautiful. And me? I thought, what am I going to do with this clearly girly girl? I mean, not only was she gorgeous, she was small, she was dainty. My mother was over the moon. She sent her cupcake dresses, wedding cake dresses, frilly things, and princesses all over the walls. Now, when I was a child and I read those princess stories, I knew I wasn't the princess. I mean, it was not even a question. I wasn't the princess. I was the witch. I wanted all the power in my hands. And part of that was my mother's fault, because my mother raised me with these words: it isn't easy to be a black woman in America. You have to be 150 times better than everyone else just to be looked at as normal and average. Don't ever stop fighting. You have to fight for everything. And princesses don't fight for anything. They're weepy and cry all the time, and they must be rescued. And that could not be me, or I would not survive. I was the witch. And now I had a little bundle of joy who would make you just drool and grin. So, she was a princess. Everybody told her that. At one point, we were coming out of a store, and someone saw her and said, I just want to give her money. She's so cute. So I spent my time trying to counter-program the rest of the world. While she was little and I was telling her stories, I would get to that point in that story, that princess story where she'd been rescued, and I would say, and when they went back to the kingdom, the princess enrolled at university, and she got her PhD, and whatever she got it in, some days it would be zoology, and she spent the years cataloging the flora and fauna of the kingdom and wrote this amazing book, and the prince who she'd been dating for 3 or 4 years, he was so impressed by how brilliant she was. He asked her to marry him. She said yes, though sometimes the princess asked the prince. And they lived happily ever after, more or less. And then I would say to her, well, other people might tell you a princess story. They're going to leave that part out just because everyone understands that that's what happened. So that's how I dealt with my daughter. And she became 3 and 4, and again, just gorgeous, cupcake girl, princesses everywhere. Her world looked like some pink thing threw up into it. And I was worried. How will she be strong enough to survive this? And then she went to a Renaissance fair with us. Well, she'd been going every year since she was a baby because my husband and I, we love Renaissance fairs. And if you don't know what that is, it's like a rodeo, but in medieval times. And so we would go to the Ren Fair, and they were hawking and jousting. And my son, he's like me. No matter what's going on at the Ren Fair, he wants a black cape because he's a wizard. Always, first and foremost. And my daughter always used to get these little flowery crowns and little wand and fairy wings. And one year, when she was 4 and a half, we went to the Ren Fair. And we happened to bump into the queen who was making a promenade. And all of the knights bowed, and all the ladies curtsied, and my daughter was looking around at everybody. She walked straight to the queen and bowed like a knight. And the queen said, "Oh my goodness, a lady knight." And I saw my daughter's eyes just widen. And a little later on, when we went to get our gear, my son got his long black cape, and my daughter walked over with a sword and a shield. And she said, "I'm a knight." And she got a short cape. And for the rest of the day, she walked around the Renaissance Fair, making every knight bow to her. And I thought, how cute. Yeah, because I was still looking at this really dainty little sweet cupcake girl. And we got home, and I was sitting on the couch doing some work, and my daughter has been in her room for an hour or so. She comes marching out, and she drops a giant pile of things by the couch. And I look down, and I'm like, "Well, honey, what is this?" And she goes, "I'm not a princess, I'm a knight." She has taken every princess off every square inch of her walls. She has rolled up the princess rug, the rug that was in the bathroom. She scraped all the princess stencils off of her closet. She is not a princess. She's a knight. And my life changed a lot at that moment. She started collecting rocks because she liked to look at crystals. She started asking me questions about relativity, which I did not know the answers to. She collected bugs and frogs. And now, that girl, I know that girl. It was wonderful. She's still drop dead gorgeous, and she still made people stop and stare, but she became the kid that I knew, the kid I grew up with as me. We had a wonderful time going through all of this. It was still a little weird to me that she on one side was this gorgeous, drop-dead, girly girl-looking person who every now and again wanted to wear pretty dresses and would say, "Mom, I want my hair to be straight like my classmates." And it broke my heart because her hair, she got it from me. And my husband is Jewish, and his hair is really, really curly. Her hair was never going to be straight like her classmates. And so I said to her at the age of 6, I said, "Dareth, my dear, your hair is amazing. And when you get to be middle school, every girl's going to want their hair to look just like yours." Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was true or not, but it seemed like the thing to say. And it calmed her right down. Years passed. My daughter is brilliant. Like brilliant. Like she skipped grades, tested out of elementary school in reading when she was 7. And we were running around trying to figure out how to raise a child like this. Still absolutely drop dead gorgeous. She stops traffic occasionally. It's unreasonable. But that's how it is. And I wondered what would become of her. Like, how would she find strength with this strange dichotomy? In middle school youth group and in high school youth group, my daughter and son went down to New Orleans, or Nolans, depending on where you're from, and they helped build houses for Habitat for Humanity. They worked after Hurricane Katrina to build houses to actually help clear away debris. They spent years doing that. They loved it. And they met people from all over the world. Some of the best memories they have in high school are about working on Habitat for Humanity's houses. My daughter's 21 now. She's graduating from UNC this fall. Oh, actually, no, spring. Gosh, where's the year gone? a company that wanted her to do an internship. Well, last summer she couldn't do it because of COVID. They said, just call us before you graduate. And she called them the other day. They're like, yeah, well, we have a job for you. That doesn't even make any sense to me. I mean, I'm a performer. I spend my time going, hire me. She's getting her degree in computer science with minors in creative writing and visual arts. She's still drop dead gorgeous. She's funny. She loves power tools. And I think about what it's like to raise her. And that moment when I thought it was so cute when everyone was bowing to her. It didn't cross my mind that she was a badass. That was not what I was thinking. I was thinking, how cute. And so I'm as much a victim of what I think of as a strong woman as my mother was. Because you see, my mother didn't want me to be a frilly girl because frilly girls are what she liked. It was because she was raised by a woman who remembers a woman who had been enslaved. It's her great-grandmother. And black women did not get any shrift at all. Not short shrift, no shrift. The only women around them they saw who had any respect were cupcake ladies. In order to be respected as a woman, you had to be faint and beautiful and lovely and put together. Hollywood didn't help, right? All the women we saw, even the strong ones, they were Greta Garbo, the whole thing. What does it mean to be a strong woman? My mother raised me to be a strong woman, but it never occurred to her that I couldn't, I couldn't just be like regular. I had to be pretty. And when I wasn't, she didn't quite know what to do, but she let me go. And when I had a daughter and she was pretty, I was worried about it. Because everybody knows if you're pretty and you're faint and all this, you can't be a strong woman. And so I've learned, watching my daughter, who is a proud pansexual, go through the world and just tear it up and be who she is. I'm not a girly girl. My daughter's not a girly girl. But she can girly girl with the best of them. She's a Renaissance woman. And I like it.
What an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing. Our next speaker is Michelle Osborne. She's a senior project manager at a local nonprofit and lives in Durham with her dog Riggins. She enjoys doing improv in her free time and is excited to tell a story with us tonight. Here she is.
On February 12th, 2020, Survivor's highly anticipated 40th season premiered. It was an all-winner season called Winners at War. I hadn't watched Survivor since I was in high school, but when I found out that my family was doing a fantasy league, I had to get in. My brother and my parents had kept watching. So I signed up for the fantasy league. I drafted Amber, who I knew from All-Stars season, and I drafted Ethan from season 3, Africa. I rounded out my team with Sarah Lucina, who I didn't know anything about, but she looked cool from her picture on the website. In March of 2020, I found myself with a whole lot more time on my hands as everything shut down for the pandemic. And, Winners at War had been about a month into it, and so I found myself wanting to go back and learn more about the backstories of these winners. So I watched Yule's first season, and then I watched Michelle's first season, and it just kept going from there. And soon it became a mission. I had to watch all 40 seasons of Survivor. While other people were baking bread or having Zoom happy hours, I was focused on my goal. This is around the same time that a bunch of people got into Tiger King, but I could not be distracted. You don't get through nearly 500 hours of content by taking a detour for Carol Baskins. Now, as I watched Survivor and as I lived through this global pandemic that we all lived through, I began to notice some similarities between these two situations. So, for example, limited access to toilet paper, not being able to see your friends or family, wearing the same clothes every day, not taking a shower. having way more time on your hands than you know what to deal with lots of time to reflect, and having the opportunity to be transformed a bit by these new situations. On Survivor, every season, people are transformed. They learn things about themselves that they never knew before. And so they are able to grow and experience new things about themselves. And my life before the pandemic was very different. I was commuting 1 hour each way to work every day. I was often on the road traveling for work or traveling out of state for conferences or events. At night, I would come home, walk my dog, shove some pizza in my mouth, and then head out the door for an improv practice or hanging out with friends. My life was busy. My life was on the move, and I liked it that way. But with everything shutting down, everything slowed down a bit. I don't have any roommates, and all my family lives out of state, so I spent a lot of time with just me and my dog. And so I started using that time that I would normally spend commuting just to walk around my neighborhood, walk in the woods. I walked so much. I walked so much that I gave myself a minor toe injury. My life slowed down to a walking pace. And with this walking, I was able to get some time to reflect on my life and just process this time. I grew up in a very religious context, one where women were expected to love and marry men, and that's the world that I had lived in for a very long time. But with all of this additional time from everything shutting down, I had time to reflect on this, and I had time to roll around this idea in my head of loving women, this idea that I had shoved down for a while. And the more I tried it on and rolled it around, the more that it felt like something that I wanted to try on more. And so a few months into the pandemic, I switched my preferences on the dating apps to women. A few months after that, I matched with a woman who had also spent the pandemic with her dogs and grew up very religious. And we've been dating for a few months now. I know that the pandemic has been truly awful and that my story represents a large amount of privilege. And even though I've changed a lot over this past year, I need to be clear that I am not a hero. Like I said, I never baked any bread. I got halfway through a paint by numbers before setting it aside and never returning. I only completed one puzzle the whole year. I literally spent 6 months of my life watching only Survivor. Through it all, I did experience growth and transformation. Every season on Survivor, the contestants have the opportunity to grow and change and let these new circumstances affect them. They're challenged physically and emotionally, and they have the opportunity to get to know themselves at a deeper level and conquer things that they never thought they could. And so even though I did not come close to winning that Survivor Fantasy League, I feel like I came away still with something significant from this past year, a victory of a different sort.
My name is Christine, and I am the volunteer manager with Orange Habitat. I've been working with this affiliate for almost 5.5 years, and my favorite program is Women Build. Women Build is where women help fund and build a habitat home. We get on site multiple times throughout the year and do construction, which could be anything from framing out the house to installing vinyl siding, or my absolute favorite is our women's roofing crew. If you'd like to learn more about any of these programs, please check out our website and come volunteer on the construction site. Women Build goes beyond just working on the construction site. We also help fund homes through doing fundraisers throughout the year. I hope you find a way to get involved. Next up, we have someone who might be very near and dear to your heart if you've been in the Women Build family for a little while. If you remember building on Suyapa's home in Tenon Woods, I am so pleased to announce that her daughter Michelle will be sharing a story with you. Michelle is a senior at Orange High School, and we're very proud to announce will be attending UNCG in the fall.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle. You also might know me as Suyapa's daughter from Habitat. First of all, I would just like to thank everyone from Women's Build. They helped me and our Habitat house and get everything done, and we've been living there for a couple years now. I'm pretty sure it's about 5 to 6 years now. I'm very grateful for you guys for helping us in that wonderful journey, and now I have a place that I can call home. My story is about mental health and how I think mental health is very important because women are strong people. And in the end of the day, even though we are strong, I know that we also have our moments of weaknesses when we would love to just give up or we just don't know what to do in life. And we're there just contemplating and wondering if I should still be here, which is one of the questions I personally went through. We're going to start back in my 7th grade year when I was about 13 years old. And my 13-year-old self, I was in middle school, I was going to Turntine in Burlington. I came into my moment of weakness. My moment of weakness was very depressing. I was there. My grades started slipping. I thought I could never become anything in this world because my grades started slipping, and I just felt like I had no one in the world. And so because of that, I decided to become suicidal, and I tried to take my own life. I was in the hospital for about a month fighting for my life and trying to stay here, and then God gave me the opportunity to keep fighting and to still be here, to show the world that I'm a woman and that I can become something very successful in this hard world. Also, here I am 6 years later, going off to college, going off to UNCG, because God gave me that opportunity to not stop fighting for what I want. He told me, Michelle, you are going to be a successful person in this world. You will make it. And here I am, going to college, getting a scholarship for UNCG. And I couldn't have been more prouder to myself. And I look back to my 13-year-old self now, and I tell her, if I could tell her, wow, if you could have just seen yourself in the future, if you could just look into the future and see that you would become something and you wouldn't have fallen into that moment of weakness. But my moment of weakness is here for the rest of you who are either feeling this type of way, thinking that you might not be in something important in this world. My message to you is not to give up. Why? Because you will become someone important if you put your mind to it, if you keep fighting. You are a woman and you are strong. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. The next storyteller that we have is someone who I've gotten to know through the Orange Habitat Youth Council. She attends Chapel Hill High School and is the co-chair of the Orange Habitat Club. Her name is Tia, and her favorite activity is roofing with the women's roofing crew.
My friend made what must have seemed to her to be a harmless statement with harmless intent. Isn't Tia an atheist? Well, I tried to consider that. She's my friend. She's not trying to be offensive. My mind was going a million miles a minute. How does she not know? How many more times do I need to talk about it? How many more times do I need to say it? Why am I not seen? And as I was formulating a sassy response in my mind, all I could think about was my mom. As a teenager, my mom would have considered herself fortunate to pass off as an atheist. 1984 in the US means Purple Rain, the LA Olympics, or even George Orwell's dystopian novel coming to life. 1984 to my mom was a living hell, her worst nightmare coming to life. In 1984, the Indian government orchestrated and instigated riots against Sikh people, targeting them and scapegoating them as the worst of the worst, those who are against us. They used incentives to deputize their citizens, giving them money, alcohol, weapons, food, and more, with the intent to harm Sikhs. They even took the censuses, formulating out where do the Sikhs live? Let's list out their addresses. What are their commonly known names? Essentially making a hit list. And the evening that the riots had climaxed, got to their worst point, my mom, my uncle, and my grandmother were at home. Their plan was, if they come from the front with their torches, ready to burn our home down to the ground, we'll escape through the back. We'll run to another neighbor's house, we'll try to hide in a Muslim or a Hindu's home, and we'll do what we can. As the riots had slowly worked their way up the street to my mom's house, people had surrounded their home, front and back, with torches. They were ready to burn their home down to the ground with them inside it, without remorse. As my mom and my grandmother and uncle were praying for their lives, their saving grace was that the mob got distracted by another family down the street. Their saving grace was that they got distracted by someone else. Days later, my mom went from nearly fleeing from her home to sitting elbow to elbow with the very kids whose parents had participated in these riots. Nobody dared to say a word. Nobody dared to talk about the events in November of 1984. In 1947, my Nanaji, or grandfather, was 8 years old. At 8 years old, his Punjab, the region he lived in, was split in half, divided and conquered, so to say. All the Hindus were pushed to India, and all the Muslims pushed to Pakistan, with Punjab, the region of all the Sikhs, being cut right in the half, and Sikhs being the very definition of the gray area. With hours of notice, my Nana and his family were notified that you have to leave with what you can carry. There's no chance, there's no hope, you have to get out. But with anything but the promise of safe passage. My great-grandmother, my Nana's mother, sent my Nana at 8 years old to the train station to go scout out and see if the havoc and chaos had passed through. Hoping that at 8 years old, who would harm an 8-year-old boy? He's innocent, he's done nothing. They would have mercy on him. They sent him off to the train station, they sent him off with the defense of a pocket full of Kashmiri mirch, or red pepper. As he went to the train station, he passed by villages burning, women crying, and children orphaned. But when he reached the train station, he realized that, okay, the chaos had passed through. It was safe to travel. And as he returned home to let his mother know of the good news, he encountered a white man on his horse, a British soldier. This soldier must have seen him as nothing more than an inconvenience, another kid in the way. So, as my Nana was walking by trying to hide himself in whatever way possible, make himself unnoticeable, the soldier was prepared to reach down when my Nana reached in his pocket with a pocket full of pepper and threw it in that man's eyes. Because of that pocket of Kashmiri mirch, he is still alive today. And because of that, his family was the only family to get out of that village alive. I can't claim India, the land who persecuted my mom and all Sikhs without remorse, who instigated hate. But I can't claim Pakistan, the land of my ancestors and holy sites, who threw my family and my people out like nothing more than pawns. But it is my responsibility to claim Sikhi, because my parents and my grandparents and my ancestors could not do so safely. So, to clarify, I am not an atheist.
That was such an inspirational story. Thank you so much for sharing. Next, we have Catherine Gregory, a future Habitat homeowner in the Odie Street neighborhood in Hillsborough. She's the membership director for the Orange County Girl Scouts and enjoys spending her free time with her 3 children, one of which is also a Girl Scout. She's lived in Chapel Hill for over a decade since she relocated here to attend UNC. Here she is, Catherine.
So when I was growing up as a young girl in eastern North Carolina, in a little town so small you wouldn't even find it on a map, childhood back then was so simple. Things were easy. Life was good. I loved my hometown. I remember I used to be a tomboy. running barefoot through the grass and playing down the street by the creek. And I remember this one day that my grandparents brought home this baby pine tree for us to plant in our front yard. And we walked around and found the perfect spot. We dug the hole together and we planted this little sapling in its forever place. And growing up, my sister and I, we watched that pine tree grow up too. And over the years, it became the source of our hide and seek home base and our picnics under the shade. And looking back, I never had to worry about where I was or where I was going. But as I was growing up, I faced some challenges and made some mistakes, just like everyone else. But there was one thing that would be different, that would change my life forever. When I was in my junior year of high school, I got pregnant with my son. And according to everyone else, you can kiss my future goodbye. But I knew that I had a new motivation in life. And although I faced the ugly side of things, judgment disguised as sympathy and criticism disguised as advice, instead of support, I got side eyes. And it hurt, but it made me that much stronger. And I knew that God had more in store for me and that this was only the beginning. So all that work that I put in my childhood, it finally paid off. I got accepted into Carolina and I never looked back. I left all them people who doubted me right where they belonged. And I had an eagerness, a hunger for this new taste of life, but college wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. As a young mom with a new baby, there were so many challenges. It was almost impossible to meet every deadline, make it to every class, write every paper, have any kind of social life. But I chose to be a mother first, to work through school and motherhood, balancing finances and relationships, which didn't last, but the struggles did. And although I've been down bad and up good, I always managed to persevere. And when I had my youngest daughter, the dynamic of my life changed again entirely. We realized that she was born with a permanent disability and that she may never walk on her own. I never imagined myself capable of being a mom to someone so special. But as I've learned to care for her, it has humbled me in ways like none other. To see the way that she keeps pushing and keeps trying, even despite all of her odds, and the way that my other children rally around her and lift her up. There's such compassion there, such strength, and they truly inspire me every day. And I realized that God did choose me to be their mom. And I've got to give them all the things they deserve in this life. All the wonderful things that I got to experience when I was growing up. So fast forward to today, as a single mom with 3 kids, working full-time in a pandemic, I search for every opportunity to give my kids a better life. And I actually stumbled upon Habitat for Humanity quite a while back. And I put myself on this mile-long wait list, and I knew they did amazing work in our community. And I knew that when the opportunity arose, I was finally in a place in my life and in my career that I could take this step and I could make this kind of commitment for my family. I remember the application process was extensive and intimidating, but I got my ducks in a row and I trusted God and I went for it. There were months of waiting in suspense and checking my email every day. But I'll never forget the day that the answer finally came. I remember being so nervous, closing my eyes, taking a breath, and saying this long prayer before I clicked, and skimming the page, looking for the answer. And there it was. It felt so surreal to say that I was going to be a Habitat homeowner and that my kids were going to have their forever home, and I was going to get to build it from the ground up. How cool is that? So as I've been working on this awesome project over the past several months, I realized all the hard work that really goes into it. volunteering at the construction site and learning how to use power tools. But every time it seemed so difficult, I thought about my kids, how strong they are. And that always kept me going. And once the house is finished, I'll always be able to notice those imperfections of things that I didn't quite build correctly or maybe didn't quite measure right. But I'm already so excited for these new memories that I'm building with my family in this home. And even to this day, when I go back and take my kids to my old home to visit my mom in Williamston, and I see that old pine tree towering 50 feet over the house now, starting to get old and lose some branches, but I know I'll always be able to call that place home. And although that small town wasn't perfect, just like life isn't perfect, I know that I will always treasure those memories that I had there. And now, thanks to Habitat for Humanity and a little hard work, I'll finally be able to give my kids the exact same thing. And maybe, just maybe, we'll plant our very own pine tree in our own front yard one day.
A big part of the Women Build program is raising money to help build the homes that volunteers are building. This year's goal is $40,000, and thanks to tonight's event, we're getting even closer to reaching that goal. Thank you to all of you, because by being here, you made a donation of some sorts to attend. We're still looking to raise money, and you can still purchase raffle tickets on the website that you made your donation, or you can purchase one of these t-shirts in purple or in pink. We also are excited to share that starting today, all donations up to $5,000 will be matched by an anonymous donor. So get online, make a gift, and help us reach our $40,000 goal.
So if you're hearing all these stories and you've decided that you want to come join us on site, we'd absolutely love to see you. We will be building with our Women Build weekend on Friday, April 30th and Saturday, May 1st. We'll be posting shifts online at our volunteer platform, which we'll drop in the chat, and we'll have posted in other ways for you to find. But please sign up online and check out our COVID protocol before you sign up to build. We'll also be sharing more opportunities to build throughout the summer, so I hope that you come swing a hammer. Please know that you have to be 16 or up to come to the job site, and there's no experience required. Our site supervisors will train you on everything that you need to know before you start your shift. Hope to see you soon.